Really fun one today. I was very happy when Jonathan agreed to this. So today we're joined by Jonathan Howell of Big World Pictures, which I learned moments ago was actually a 501c3 nonprofit. So I can't wait to dig into that a little bit. But Jonathan, Big World Pictures is a nonprofit dedicated to cross-cultural understanding through the distribution and exchange of critically acclaimed foreign films. Did I get that right? And also, thank you for joining.
Yeah, more or less. Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. No, I'm so happy that you're here. So Jonathan, you have been running Big World Pictures now for quite a while. For is it 10 years?
10 years, yeah. I like to say the company was founded at the Berlinale in 2013. That's when I first started acquiring films for the company. And then our first theatrical release was almost a year later in January 2014.
And what was your first theatrical release?
That was In Bloom, the Georgian feature that premiered at the Berlinale in 2013 by Nana Ektemishvili, sorry if I'm saying that right, and Simon Gross.
Yeah, okay. I That's amazing. So I mean that okay, the first thing that comes to mind, and maybe this is just a good way of kind of an intro into Big World. Uh, I want to dig into the history and how you got started and what the name means and all these things. But the first thing that just strikes me, and I hope people hear right out of the gate, the films that you're curating are phenomenal in terms of you talk about cross-cultural exchange, cross-cultural understanding. I mean, right out of the gate, with at least with OCN distribution, I saw that your film from Simon Lang, and
Mhm.
then the second film was Radu Jude. Like I mean, we'll get into, I know that you have more releases, but how are you finding these movies and just also thank you from the collecting community. These are phenomenal.
Oh, glad you enjoy them. Basically, I think the our acquisition strategy is similar to, or it's kind of modeled on New Yorker films, which is where I learned the business and worked for about a decade.
Okay.
It's a combination of classics and also just discovering new filmmakers who have a lot of potential. So examples of that latter category is Radu Jude and Maya Vitkova from Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, yeah, of course, Nana Ektemishvili and Simon Gross. We actually just acquired their second feature, My Happy Family, which had been a Netflix title, so barely saw the light of day in theaters. But now we're going to try to get it into theaters and at least make it available on home video. Sorry, what was the question?
No, mostly it was just an appreciation for what you're doing and also kind of how you acquire. So that's
Mhm.
perfect.
Mhm.
But it's phenomenal to me because it feels like through OCN right now, I use you a lot of times as a way of saying the breadth of content that they have that they're
Sure.
distributing into the US.
Yeah.
Because it feels like cheating almost. This is what I say, to be able to buy a Simon Lang film through the Vinegar Syndrome website. Like, yeah,
Right.
I really love that. So,
Well,
anyways,
and our
mhm.
latest release there is Nuri Bilge Ceylan's breakthrough film Distant. So that's actually a title that New Yorker Films released originally in 2004. So that's an example of the classics that we're picking up as well and trying to make available. It's been out of release for about a decade now.
I love that. Yeah, I want to dig into that because by a fun coincidence, the first interview that we had in 2023 was with Elizabeth Yu, who
Hmm.
did the artwork for Distant.
Right, yeah.
And so we were talking
Great.
about that, and then when she said that, I was like, "Oh, that's exciting! I think we're going to be talking to Jonathan here before long." Um, but yeah, so l- let's go back a little bit because I just jumped in. I just wanted to kind of celebrate you.
Mhm.
But let's
Thanks.
jump back a little bit. So 10 years ago, you're in Berlin, start acquiring pictures. Did you have a name for that? Is that when you kind of incorporated and got a name at that
Yeah,
time as
yeah.
well? Okay.
I'd already been planning it for a little while and thinking of, I had a logo made by a colleague at New Yorker Films, Ron Ramsland. And I came up with a name from the notion that, well, the Walt Disney thing is it's a small world after all. I beg to differ. It's actually a big world, and we aim to show the diversity of the world by acquiring films from all over the world. So we have films from, several from Europe, a lot from Eastern Europe, probably the dominant category is Eastern Europe, a couple from Brazil, a couple from Taiwan, one from China, uh, one from Canada. We used to have lost that one, but it was a Denny Cote's curling.
Okay.
We, yeah, we're just trying to show different cultures and to expose people to cultures they otherwise wouldn't encounter.
I okay, so I have to just say, on a personal level, that's very exciting to hear. So I grew up between London, Houston, and then Indonesia.
Wow.
And so this is there's this term, I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but it's called third culture kid. A lot of people use to kind of define growing up without a home culture. And so this idea
Uh-huh.
of traveling kind of becomes the home culture.
Uh-huh.
And having multiple sort of kind of core identities is,
Right.
so anyways, so just at a personal level, everything you just described is very satisfying. And I hope that people listening understand the importance of this. Because I mean, maybe I've seen the first two that you put out there, OCN, and then I want to
Mhm.
ask about the second two. But I think a film like Rebels of the Neon God, just if we can just start there for a minute, one of the things that jumped out to me is that is fully a Taiwanese film. That was not
Mhm.
meant to be sort of made for international audiences, but
Mhm.
in a funny way, by going so specific into this one story, it almost in a way becomes more universal because you get to
Exactly. Yeah.
see, yeah, go
I
go on,
agree.
yeah. Is that was your experience as well?
Um, well, in that specific case, that was I was shocked that the film was even available.
Yes.
I had seen it at BAM a couple of times, and as special exhibitions, but it had never been released theatrically in the U.S., which again was shocking to me based on the subsequent. I mean, he was always a rock star to me. As soon as I saw Vive l'Amour, I was like, oh my God, this guy's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I saw everything he released after Vive l'Amour, and to find that Rebels of the Neon God was never released theatrically in the US was just such a surprise for me. So of course, I started tracking it down, finally found it and acquired it. Strangely, it didn't, it got perfect reviews. It's, not that I like to use Rotten Tomatoes as a gauge, but it's 100% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes.
Awesome.
And it got a half-page review in the New York Times from A.O. Scott with a huge photo, and it didn't perform. So it was really disappointing box office on that theatrical release. We played some landmark theaters, didn't perform there, and then it's taken probably took 5 years of it being in release for it to get some traction. And now I feel like it's really coming into its own and it's really become part of the canon, really.
Well, that's a fascinating journey. So in that time, so you're when if you don't mind, what year roughly did you acquire it then? So this
2015.
2015.
Yeah, we released it in 2015, I should say. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're saying that it really took up until about 2020, and then now you have the physical release, and now
Mhm.
you're seeing that momentum that you just assumed would have been there from the beginning.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm glad the story ends well. It's a beautiful film. And I think I was trying to describe this as I was writing up on it just briefly, but it feels sort of like a slow cinema type of film at times, but
Yeah.
at the same time, it's got a lot going on and it's very engaging and
Yeah.
it's very easy to watch.
Yeah. I think it's unique in his work. And I think from what I've heard, there are a few things he's not really satisfied with about it. He feels like the soundtrack, which I think is so memorable, and everyone seems to love the soundtrack, including me. I
Yeah.
think he felt like that was not something he really wanted to, but it was pushed upon him.
Oh, okay.
Um, but it's just, yeah, it's such a, I mean, it's clearly his most accessible film. And I feel like with each film after that, he's become a little less accessible, more slow cinema. But again, Vive l'Amour, his second feature, was the first one I saw, and it just blew me away.
Powerful.
The silent comedy. There's like Buster Keaton type comedy in there, physical comedy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. Wow. Okay. Well, and then before we talk about Radu Jude for a second, I feel like that's a great intro into kind of your mind and how you work and how you like to find these films. So are you mostly finding them through festivals?
Yeah, almost exclusively through festivals. Only one or two were not festival, first views. And those were mostly the classics. Like we had a couple Eric Romer films. A Summer's Tale was our biggest film to date. That was in 2014. We released A Tale of Winter later that year,
Oh, cool.
and then Rebels and Distant. Those were basically the repertory titles that we picked up, classics.
Yeah.
Everything else, like really, they've all been festival views, mostly, to be honest, from the Berlinale. I think I'd say almost half our catalog is from the Berlinale.
Okay. And I know that, so do you mind giving me a little bit of background into the Berlinale? Because I know a lot of the fans that are listening are, we focus a lot on kind of, we're split personality. Half of the podcast is about Criterion and let's call it art house films.
Mhm.
And the other half of the podcast is around just boutique Blu-ray distribution and
Mhm.
the exciting things that are happening in that world, which tends to drift more towards genre and horror. Although
Right.
I'm so happy that it's not fully that way. But do you mind, like, what is the Berlinale and how are you getting films from there? And just kind of, yeah, do you want to give them a little background?
Well, it's one of the two big festivals in Europe that New Yorker films always attended. So again, since that's where I learned the business, I kind of modeled the company on their acquisition strategy. Um, I try to go to Berlin, Cannes, and Toronto each year. Doesn't always work out that I make it to all three, but Berlin has been a consistent one that I've made it to every year. Um, that basically, covers the whole year in a way. If they're spaced out in just the right amount where you can get all of the big premieres from these, or most of the big premieres from these three festivals. So it's about 10 days, 10 or 12 days in February, and there are just numerous films going on all the time, numerous categories. There's the forum, there's panorama, there's the main competition, there's a repertory sidebar, and
What?
then there's also a market alongside it, the EFM, European Film Market, which is, along with Cannes, Marché du Film, those are the two biggest European markets to my knowledge. So when you're not seeing films that are actually selected by the festival, you can see market screenings that can be things that didn't get selected, or maybe things that played at a previous film festival somewhere else, but still haven't been picked up by all territories. So the sales agents are still trying to find a buyer for them in certain territories.
Oh, fascinating. So it's just really vibrant kind of marketplace for
Oh my
film.
God. So yeah, it's very busy. And it sounds like a dream, and really is one of the main perks of my job, but it's also really, really frantic and busy because you're watching films all day long. You could
Yeah.
watch them all evening long if you wanted to. I usually try to get something to eat at some point. So yeah, it's just like it's a frantic time, but really rewarding too.
And I guess it's coming up. We're recording this
Oh
on
yeah,
February
yeah,
1st,
yeah.
but when is it this year?
Starts the 16th,
Oh,
February 16th to 26th, I believe.
okay. So this is going to drop right smack in the middle of that festival then.
Oh, huh.
So you'll be there. I'll let you know. It may be a day or two before you can hear it when this drops, if
Okay,
uh,
cool.
if you're in the middle of it. But I can't wait to see what comes out. So Okay, I'm so happy this is the way the conversation is going, because one of the things I've noticed, and you might be the best person to answer this, is it feels like for the boutique labels, right? That are just, in the way that I define boutique, I know everyone kind of has a different look at this, but the way that I always talk about boutique is if it's not the studio that's putting out the physical release, right?
Mhm,
Where there's an acquisition component before you even get into the production of the disc.
mhm,
For a lot of these boutique companies, it feels like it's easier to go and look in a studio's catalog, or look in the, like you call it, the repertory sort of side of things,
mhm,
right? And so I think maybe it's less expensive. I don't really understand the business, but what I think is missed in that is the films that are coming out now.
mhm, right.
And it just feels like it's through streaming and through maybe just the changing nature of the physical media as a whole. It feels like we're in this weird kind of um, weird time where it's actually a lot of these films are somewhat getting lost because they're just showing at
Mhm.
festivals and that's it.
Yeah, well, I have a lot to say on that, probably more than you have time for, but I think to be more focused about your point, um, I can say that we do have a couple of our new releases that will be coming out through OCN in the months ahead. I'm not going to say what they are because OCN
Sure,
likes to keep that as a special announcement. But
sure.
yeah, we have one that just premiered in 2022, another one premiered in 2021. So it's not entirely the older films. Of course, the Rodney Jude film that we released last summer through OCN is also, I think it was from 2019. So it's not just the repertory things, but what they're looking for, and we of course agree with them, is we want a Blu-ray that's going to be it's going to have some demand behind it.
Hmm.
And a lot of the smaller films, sometimes we'll release a film theatrically and it does, $20,000 gross. So that means a lot of people haven't seen it and they may not be aware of it, and there's not going to be as much demand for it, clearly.
So that's just more of a kind of case by case, I guess, on
Yeah,
if
I
you
mean,
feel,
just
yeah.
yeah, I mean, the Blu-ray production is pretty expensive, so you have to make
Mhm.
sure you're investing well. Just pick a winner.
I'm just curious now. You've whet my appetite. What what was the direction you wanted to take that answer? Just at a high level, I'm curious.
Oh,
What?
just that theatrical has become really, really, really challenging, and it was already, it's been moving that direction for over a decade, I would say,
Mhm.
maybe longer. But especially since the pandemic, I mean, we survived the pandemic, but when the theaters reopened, they're thinking, oh, we lost all this time, we lost all this money, we have to make it up. And what we see in theaters, or what I've observed, is that most theaters, even the art houses, are playing as commercial art house and even sometimes commercial as they can possibly find. And these smaller films are often not getting selected. Um, it's harder to get a date for a smaller, especially foreign language film, even if it's critically acclaimed or has won some prizes. And to be honest, it's not just theaters. The audiences are staying home as well, because the core theatrical foreign film audience is basically 60 plus years old. And I guess during the pandemic, maybe they outfitted their homes with home theater systems, and maybe they just thought, oh, it's not worth going back to the theaters now. I don't know what to say about that, but it's just we've lost a core element of our audience, and they haven't come back yet. So
Interesting.
even if the theaters do program these smaller foreign films, the audience isn't really supporting them.
That's such a shame, because I feel like from a creativity perspective, throughout history, we kind of go through waves and I feel like we're right now in a very strong wave of interesting new films that are being made.
Mhm. Yeah, that's
I
true. I
just
agree. Yeah,
And so it's a shame that that's not getting seen.
right.
I feel like I was very fortunate when I was in college, was 2000 to 2005. and I was in Dallas, which at that time had, I think it was 24 screens that were playing independent or foreign films.
Hmm.
And so I was spoiled for choice.
Hmm.
And
Right.
it was amazing. Like there would be I always joke about this, but looking back, it was kind of an honor. It was the Cremaster cycle.
Yes.
It was one of the few places in the US where they showed the entire thing. So on a Saturday I went and I just sat, and honestly I hated it. I was so bored. But I did like the experience
Yeah.
of, like, it was a cool thing to be able to go, and they had enough screens in Dallas where they could do that on a Saturday and they
Exactly.
showed the whole thing.
Wow.
Um and so I just, yeah, like I live in Austin now, which has a fairly vibrant film scene, but
Mhm.
even the screens that would typically show a lot of foreign and art house pictures, for one, there's not that many of them anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
And for two, like you said, I have noticed they've gone more commercial with their releases,
Mhm.
which is an interesting. So I completely see that trend here,
Mhm.
now that you mention it. Well, we've talked a little bit about Radu Jude, but maybe this is the good time to get into it. So I don't care if we go. I do not care if we go down in history as barbarians. It's a long title,
Mhm.
but Radu gives a fantastic, one of my favorite director intros ever
Great.
on that on the disc. So if
Yeah.
anyone listening, if you see the movie, please watch the intro.
Yeah.
Um, I
Great.
was just one book after the other of where the history of this is coming from is fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, he's
Uh,
so well read, and he really integrates the stuff into the films, especially that film. You see the protagonist reading texts from
yeah.
um, that are related to the Holocaust or even past pogroms, and
Well,
yeah,
and
it's
some very
really interesting.
provocative decisions too, like just holding an image on the
Oh yeah.
screen for a minute or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Um, so are you getting to work with Radu? No, like, are you talking to him and just kind of working with him directly?
I don't talk to him that often, but I do.
Mm.
I did manage to catch up with him in Berlin a couple of years ago, and I asked, "So, what's your next film?" He said, "I'm making a sex comedy." It's like, what? I really thought he was joking, of course, but then the next year, Bad Luck Banging came out,
Yeah.
and yeah, so he's unpredictable. He's really experimental. You know, he really pushes the envelope. That year that I met up with him in Berlin, he had two films at the Berlinale, Uppercase Print and a documentary called The Exit of the Trains, which is, I think, 3 hours long. And it's entirely composed of still images of victims of this pogrom before, previous to World War II. And someone is reading letters of their contemporaries or their family members about, about this person who died in the pogrom,
Oof.
and that's
Wow.
that's the entire film. Is 3 hours of that, and so
Wow.
he said that was his archival period. Between that and Uppercase Print, he was examining archival materials, which he actually did in Apharim as well. All the text in Apharim was uh, basically found in contemporary sources. Not maybe not all, but it's all inspired by that, and much of it was actually sourced from contemporary sources.
Okay, interesting. Um, well, like you said, the fact of how well read he is and just sort of how intelligent he is comes through in Barbarian. So it sounds like that's continuing in his other pictures. You've
Mhm.
released Afram and Uppercase Print and Barbarians, is that right? So you have at least three
Right.
of his pictures.
Yeah, and also Scarred Hearts. That was the second one we did.
Scarred Hearts, okay. And are these, just going back to the conversation we were just having about theatrical, are his films playing fairly well when they're released? Are people kind of aware of that name
Well,
now and going to see it?
Apharim did actually.
Good.
Apharim, we released it in actually we released it in January 2016 on a weekend that there was a snowstorm that closed theaters on Saturday. So it was kind of devastating in that regard. But that was another case where we got a huge, excellent review from A.O. Scott in the Times. He put it on his top 10 list that year. And um, it ended up, actually, we did manage to hold over at Angelica and Lincoln Plaza.
Okay.
And it ended up grossing over 100,000 to be our second largest, second best performing film after A Summer's Tale. And I guess that also put it in the, I think, in the top 4 Romanian New Wave releases in the US. I think only the films of Cristian Mungiu have grossed more than Afterine, at least to date.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. So,
The others, not so much. Yeah, sorry to say, I Do Not Care If We Go Down in History as Barbarians grossed around 12,000 theatrically.
oof, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so you're fighting this good fight here. Um, and this is the thing that I just want to keep going back to this point. I mean, I hope people start catching on because Rebels of the Neon God is Taiwan. I got that it is Taiwan, right? I've said
Right.
that. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Barbarians, I Do Not Care If We Go Down in History as Barbarians is Romanian.
Mhm.
And I think just as a really quick aside before we get into Victoria, that title, I know it's a bit of a mouthful, but I love how he actually shows the text it comes from and gives the history.
Mhm. Right.
Um, anyways, I just
Yeah, and
uh,
he makes a point of he makes a point of putting the title in quotation marks because it is an actual quotation.
yeah,
He doesn't want people, of course, to think that that's his perspective, but this is a quote, and so we put it on the poster in quotes, we put it on the DVD box in quotes, because it's a quote.
yeah, that's awesome. And then you go into Victoria, which is what is the country that's from Maya
Bulgaria.
Vidkova? Bulgaria. Okay,
Yeah.
that's right. Um, and
Interestingly, the director of Victoria, worked with Radu Jude on a couple short films prior to making Victoria.
oh wow,
I
okay.
think I think they co-wrote a couple of shorts.
And she has an interesting background because wasn't she also was it Terry Gilliam or wasn't she also working with one of the Monty Python um
I'm not aware of that.
characters before this? Okay. But so she was working with but she's working with Radu Jude and then developed Victoria. What can you tell me just a little bit about the film and kind of
Sure.
everybody about a little bit about the film?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard film to describe, but I think it's really an ideal film for Women's History Month, which is coming up, because it's, as Richard Brody of the New Yorker called it, it's one of the great recent films about women by a woman.
Okay.
He put it on his top 10 list that year, and it basically covers the recent history of Bulgaria from communist times through 89 and the changes after 89. And it's really runs the gamut of tones as well, which some people I think have been thrown by that and have not understood what she was aiming for. But it's whimsical early on. It's got some magical realism in the middle of it, and then it's rather dark and almost depressive toward the end. But I think that's, yeah, in my interpretation, that's all very much intentional by the director because it reflects, again, the history of the country and how history has gone in the last, let's say, 20 years.
Wow, I love a lot of times those are the films that get revisited. I don't know if that's a cliche word, but a lot of times those are the films that get kind of revisited later and discovered as really powerful works
Yeah,
if they're
I
able
think
to.
I really think you're right about that. And this is a prime example of something that should be rediscovered at some point soon, I hope. It premiered at Sundance, generated some buzz in Sundance. I saw it in the Berlinale that same year. And um, the critical response was great in general. And the audiences, again, didn't go. But I think it's a very entertaining film. It's, to put it in the briefest terms possible, it's about a girl without a belly button.
Okay.
So this baby is born with no belly button, and she's considered you know, a phenomena, of course. And the communist leaders take her as an example. They make her the baby of the year, and they say this is the person of the future, because now women can, they don't have to be tied to their children. They can, go to work immediately. And but of course, it shows a lack of connection to her family in a negative way as well, which is also examined in the film.
It's interesting. So Bulgaria, what year did this come out? You said it was
I think it
2016.
was 2014. I think we picked it up in 2015. We released it in 2016.
So right around that time was also, I believe it was a Hungarian movie called Liza the Fox Fairy,
I'm not aware of that.
which is
No,
kind of this. It's a comedy, kind of a dark comedy maybe, but it has a lot of magical realism. I'm interested. These kind of movements that are happening. I wonder if those directors are connected at all,
Mhm.
or maybe it's just a coincidence. I mean, there's uh, Hungary and Romania and Bulgaria. These countries are so maybe they don't get the same attention as other countries in terms of their film canon, but they have really well-known film schools and very established film schools.
Yeah,
Um,
when we released In Bloom, one of the poll quotes I used in the trailer was Georgia may be the new Romania, which one of my family members found really entertaining, because he's like, what does that mean? I was like, oh yeah, I guess that's inside baseball. If you are aware of what Romanian cinema has been for the past 15, 20 years, then you realize that what that means. And I really think it's true. Like, it's in evidence in the last couple of Berlinales, especially 2 years ago. There were so many Georgian films in Berlin, and they were fantastic.
and I guess are they mostly coming from Tbilisi or?
I'm not sure where they're centered. I would imagine that's the case.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I need to see more films from Georgia. Then, if that's true, because I didn't know that actually. So I'll pay attention to that. Um, the
Yeah, I
last
feel like
one
it's the center of a new wave.
that's interesting. That's super interesting. Yeah, I'm gonna dig into that then, because I love. Well, we've already kind of covered this, but yeah, I just love this idea that these films are getting picked up from different countries that aren't on the tip of people's tongues when they
Mhm.
think about film.
Sure.
Um, I think right along with that, most people that I know, when they think about Turkish cinema, they think of it as I don't want to say a joke, but they think of Turkish Spider-Man, Turkish Superman, Turkish um, these kind of exploitation movies that were coming out in the 60s and 70s and 80s.
Mhm.
Um, but Nuri Bilge Ceylan, did I get that right?
I think so. I've heard Jalon, Shalon. I'm not sure which is actually
Ceylan.
correct, but
Okay, so he put out Distant,
mhm.
and that's the fourth film he released through
Right. Through.
OCN. This is about, actually, it is 20 years old now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Um,
premiered in Turkey in 2002. No, 2003. Yeah, so no, 2002. And then played in Cannes in 2020, or sorry, in 2003. New Yorker Films picked it up and released it in 2004.
yeah, and that's amazing. So what, just again, for the sake of give it some more exposure to this one, can you give a quick synopsis of this for everyone?
Well, if you've seen films by Shalon, then you kind of have an idea of his themes. You know that his films are also impeccably shot, because he's by training he's a photographer, and I don't know if he's been shooting all the films since then, but I know he basically made this one almost single-handedly. I think he does the editing. I know he shot it. Obviously, he wrote and directed it. So he's got pretty much all the credits. It's a pretty simple story about kind of a city mouse and a country mouse, but they're both the a guy from a village goes to visit his cousin in the city. His cousin's well established as a photographer in the city, and they're just, it's a bit of an odd couple thing. There are
Okay.
cultural clashes. There's a little bit of comedy, very subtle humor. Um, and a lot of angst and just failure to communicate.
I do like how certain directors can use comedy to kind of pull out some emotions in good ways. It's almost if it's done right, it can be a great way to humanize the characters very quickly.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Um, well, it's interesting. So you mentioned that this film has a lot of photography in it, or beautiful photography in it. So that kind of leads me to my one of my other questions I had. Um, I would say Barbarians is an exception here, simply because the cover art is something that's very specific to the movie.
Mm.
I mean, they all are, but I wouldn't say that it's as intricately designed. So I don't know if this fits my question, although I love the cover for Barbarians. But the other three movies you put out through OCN have very stunning slipcovers, just very beautiful work. Are you working with the same graphics artist, or are you doing that? Each one is a different one. It does seem like a slightly different style.
Well, I'm actually leaving that to OCN, and I just get approval of them. So we
Okay.
end up making a selection from a few different ideas that are presented. But OCN is really overseeing hiring the artists.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because the one that Elizabeth you did for Distant, she was talking about how when she was watching the film, she couldn't help but just marvel at how beautiful some of the shots were.
Mm, right.
And so she was doing her best to kind of capture that with that cover.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
but now,
he really captures like golden hour sunlight. He captures these amazing snowstorms um, in the city, and yeah, it's just really gorgeously shot, I have to say.
I think I've been able, I think it was maybe 30 years ago now. I was quite a bit younger, but we actually got to go to Istanbul and then into one of this kind of neighboring cities. I don't remember a lot because I was probably around 10 or 12 when we went, but I do remember being surprised at assuming I was going to go into sort of like a poor country, just not knowing much about Turkey. And uh, it's stunning. Like there's so many beautiful parts of that country.
Mm.
So I'm glad that he's doing a good job of capturing it.
Oh yeah.
Um, at a high level, without going into a lot of specifics, obviously, has the partnership with OCN been good for you? Are you happy that are these films getting kind of
Yeah,
purchased and viewed?
yes, yeah, I think it's great. It gives us an opportunity to release some of these. Well, like Victoria, I don't think we would have probably put it out on Blu-ray ourselves. We have released two Blu-rays as Big World Pictures. We did Raduju's first feature from us, which was Afterine, and the extras on there include a short that won Sundance called The Tube with a Hat.
Okay.
The other one we probably might not have done it. Oh, sorry. The other one we did release it through Big World Pictures is Still Life by Jie Zhangke.
Yeah.
But it's really a huge investment for a small nonprofit like us to release
Mhm.
Blu-ray, and so working with OCN really helps with that.
That's great. I've seen three different movies from Zia Zhangke. I have not seen Still Life yet, but I am fascinated by what he's done so far.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to watch Still Life. Can we still, let's see, I'm just on your website now. Can you buy, so you have it on demand on the site. Can you buy, oh, here it is, home video format. Okay, great. So this shows some of the stuff you can buy as well. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I'll have to make sure to pick that up. His one called Platform
Right.
was one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
I, I think it's just perfect. So I can't wait to see more of what he's done as he's matured as a filmmaker.
Yeah, I think he's since the earlier films I saw, New Yorker films released. I think he's the most important Chinese filmmaker of the era.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, that I completely believe that. Just from what I've seen so far, he's got such a masterful ability behind the camera. Um, okay, so the I think we covered a lot of the foundations of people just trying to get to know you. The nonprofit was that. Uh, just, AGFA is a nonprofit as well
Hmm.
here. But that's the only other time that I've heard of this style. Is there a particular um, benefit as you're working with these artists or buying these films? Is it helpful to be a nonprofit, or was there a reason that you set up that way?
It's a little bit of a winding path that led us to that, but to make it as short as possible, uh, I was working at New Yorker Films from 2001, and I heard it said a few times that, oh, they should have been a nonprofit because their films are basically educational. They started in the 60s and they had all these
Um,
political, like very left-leaning political films, including a lot of documentaries that were primarily sold as or rented to universities. So yeah, I heard it said they should have been a nonprofit. It would have made more sense. So when I started thinking about forming a company, originally it was for The World According to Shorts, which was a program I used to play at BAM every year from 2000 to 2007.
okay.
That's how I originally formed the company. The World According to Shorts was a nonprofit, and eventually we released 3 programs of shorts through New Yorker Films, theatrically and on DVD. And then when I decided to move into feature films in 2013, we just took the same company and adapted the name and the mission statement slightly.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, I I feel like just given your background, I just have a personal interest, and I think other folks that may be interested as well. Was there a movie or a set of films that sort of hooked you into cinema early on? Like, do you remember, was there kind of some seminal pictures for you that you saw early on that took you down this path?
Yeah, I think what I always trace it back to is the 10:30 Saturday night movie when I was a teenager. I would stay up and watch this movie from the Kansas City TV channels.
Okay.
It was always a film from the 70s, from the New American Cinema of the 70s. Some of the titles I remember are Nashville, The Last Picture Show, Five Easy Pieces, Taxi Driver. Probably MASH was on there too. And of course, they're edited for TV, so they cut out some things. But I just, I had always been a scopophile. I'd always watched, you know, sometimes I'd watch TV just to watch TV. Like I would turn on the TV as a child and watch the Pro Bowlers tour or like fishing shows or
Right,
golf,
right.
just because that's what was on and we didn't get that many channels. And of course it was dead boring, but I was compelled to do it. So at this point in my teens, I started watching these movies and I just felt like something was happening to me when I watched them. And I couldn't really define it, but I just felt moved by them. So that was, I think that was my intro into really fine cinema, I would say. Then when I went to college, I volunteered for the films committee. We were showing 4 or 5 different films a week from different periods every week. And yeah, from there, I just went on and always had a finger in whatever local film exhibition I could get.
I love that. Yeah, my education for me was kind of a mix because I was telling you about these screens in Dallas that were showing all these different types of films. So you could go see the Grandmaster Cycle, and then the next day you could go see a Takashi Miike movie,
Hmm.
and just get all the blood and violence you ever
Hmm.
wanted. And so I kind of came up seeing both extremes, and that certainly influenced the way that I ingest in them. And now I love both extremes now. Um, but wow, that's great. So Jonathan, that's all the questions that I have.
Okay.
Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you want to make sure people know in terms of about Big World that you just want to make sure is out there that I didn't ask?
Mm, not much. I guess it would be good for people to know that we do have a Vimeo on demand page. It has most of our features up on it for rental or download to own, either one. And you can typically find DVDs or Blu-rays on Amazon of our titles. Also, Cinema Guild sells several of our titles from their website. We have a partnership with them as well. I think that's about it.
Wonderful. And is there a social platform that you prefer if people have questions or want to ask, reach out? Is there a particular way that you prefer?
We do have a Facebook page. It's Big World Pix, PIX. Funny thing is, there's another Big World Pictures that is a distributor and producer. They make biker exploitation flicks.
So
And
similar.
yeah, they preceded us actually, but I was like, this name, I got to have this name. So now there are two Big World Pictures, but that's why I say Big World Pix, PIX, because they might be under Big World Pictures on Facebook. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Um, yeah, we're on Twitter and Instagram as well. I don't really have a preference, but you can find us typically under Big World Picks, or on Twitter, I think it's Jonathan D. Howell is my handle.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for giving us some time, and
Thank
I
you.
can't wait to see what you continue to come out with.
Me too. Can't wait to see what there is in Berlin.
Ah, good. Awesome. Good luck there.
All right, thanks a lot. Good talking to you, Chris.
Yeah, same. Thank you.